Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations will now come to order. I now recognize myself for a 5-minute opening statement. Today's hearing comes nearly 1 year after this subcommittee held a joint field hearing in McAllen, Texas with the Subcommittee on Health. It presents a chance to reevaluate the conditions at our southern border, and the conditions have only further deteriorated since that time. The implications of the border crisis extend far beyond the border communities, impacting every aspect of our nation. This crisis is not a political talking point. It's a real, widespread crisis with extensive repercussions. In McAllen, Texas, I highlighted the unprecedented way this administration operates our borders. We have reached all-time highs with the number of migrants crossing the southern border. I further expressed concerns over President Biden's handling of the border, describing it as brutal and unsustainable. Since then, the Customs and Border Protection, CBP, have reported for fiscal year 23 an astounding 2.47 million encounters at the southwest border. This is a significant escalation from approximately 450,000 encounters in fiscal year 2020. In December 2023 alone, there was an estimated 302,000 migrant encounters at the southern border, the highest monthly total ever recorded. This flood of migrants was seen during a visit by Congressional members to the southern border. During this visit, some members visited a hospital in Eagle Pass, Texas, along the border that is currently providing care for illegal immigrants. According to one of my colleagues, this hospital has a total of 5 ambulances, and one is permanently dedicated to solely transporting illegal immigrants. That doesn't mean that the others aren't used for that purpose, but one is dedicated solely to that purpose. Once in the hospital, these illegal migrants are prioritized over American citizens due to acuity concerns. In the end, this is unfair to citizens of this country and is directly due to the failure of the Biden administration to secure our southern border. Sadly, this administration seems to prioritize the health and interests of illegal migrants over those of its own citizens. Even mayors of cities like New York and Chicago are now confronting the implications and costs associated with the influx of illegal migrants that border communities have long had to deal with. These large cities are struggling to find resources to address the problem. New York has even started to force their children to sign up for online classes so they can house the illegal migrants in the schools. Additionally, the absence of effective border control has led to a significant influx of drugs, especially fentanyl and fentanyl analogs, into our communities. A loophole cartels used prior to temporary listing of analogs to traffic fentanyl into our country was by creating fentanyl analogs to evade our criminal laws. Right now, fentanyl analogs are considered Schedule I substances, but only because of temporary scheduling orders which expire on December 31st, 2024. Representative Ladd and my bill, the Halt Fentanyl Act, passed the House with bipartisan support in May of 2023. It would permanently schedule fentanyl analogs while allowing research into them to see if there's any efficacy. Beyond fentanyl, the administration's border policies have facilitated the abuse and exploitation of migrants, particularly children. The New York Times has uncovered a rise in child labor trafficking. Children as young as 13 are being forced into dangerous jobs, often in violation of federal labor laws. This is done by the sponsors our government has placed these children with. We've seen reports of severe injuries, and in some cases even fatalities. The Times reported that over 85,000 children entrusted to HHS's care have seemingly vanished, lost in a system that fails to protect the most vulnerable. This is due to the complete and utter failure of HHS to implement proper vetting processes that include detailed background checks consisting of FBI background checks and fingerprinting. In September of 2023, HHS proposed a rule regarding unaccompanied minors. This rule does little to bolster the vetting process used to place these minors. This rule makes the vetting process optional to examine living conditions, conduct background checks, and interview the sponsors before a minor is placed with them. Optional. Optional. Further, this rule does nothing to address the collaboration between state and local law enforcement, local schools, or state and local child welfare services when a child is placed with a sponsor. In short, open borders not only endanger American lives, but perpetuate criminal enterprises that exploit these vulnerable individuals. The Biden administration wants to ignore the crisis being caused by its border policies. We had a hearing in July with Secretary of HHS discussing the Office of Refugee Resettlement. The committee sent additional questions for the record to the Secretary, and he still hasn't responded to our questions. It is yet another example of how this administration tries to ignore this crisis. The situation at our southern border is simply unsustainable. It is affecting public safety, public health, and public education. This should not be a Republican versus Democrat issue. This is an American issue. I yield back.